Okay, so, like, this is a nugget I just want to talk about for a second. I want to talk about good trans representation, because I feel like whenever people talk about trans representation, they only talk about the shitty examples, which, you know, is important. Like, Disclosure, the documentary, that's pretty much all it's about, and that's important to talk about, because, like, you don't want to keep doing the same shitty things. But I feel like people don't talk enough about just, like, examples of good trans representation. So I want to talk about real quick what I feel is good trans representation. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The best trans representation, and this is echoed by other trans people, not just me, is trans representation where that's not, like, the main point of the character. Like, it comes up, it's important that it comes up, because it's still a part of their character, but they don't make it the main point. And I feel like there are some pretty good examples of this that no one talks about. Or, like, trans characters, but their struggles don't necessarily come from them being trans. That's important, because I feel like with trans people, with, like, the trauma that trans people have, people are always like, oh, it has to do with them being trans, when in reality, a lot of trans people are gonna have struggles outside of that. Sorry, there was a guy walking by. But, like, a good example would be Jules from Euphoria. Like, she's trans, they talk about it, especially in the special episode. Like, they don't ignore the fact that she is trans, but it's not, like, the main part of her character. It is a thing. And even, like, the struggles she has relating to her being trans aren't necessarily, oh no, I'm trans, so my life sucks. The struggle is more like, oh, I've framed my womanhood around what men want, which is more specific. And, like, all the stuff with her mom and everything has nothing to do with her being trans. It's just other struggles she has while also being a trans person. And that's a really important distinction to make. Also, Hunter Schafer is a Linus. I just want to throw that out there. Or, like, if you've read the webcomic Boyfriends, Felix, or I guess Goth, as he's more commonly known, even though, fun fact, they all have actual names. But Felix is canonically trans. It comes up a few times briefly, but it's not at all the focus of his character. That's not what's focused on at all. He's more of the focus of his character is that he's, like, the edgy one, because they're all based off of, like, specific tropes. So it has nothing to do with him being trans, he just also is trans. I would even argue that Lev from The Last of Us 2, while a big part of his arc does have to do with trauma related to him being trans, that's not his only personality trait. Like, if he wasn't trans, it would change his story a lot, but you could still argue that a similar thing could have happened even if he wasn't trans, just because of the toxic nature of the cult he was in. And also, that's not, like, his only character trait. A lot of times, you have trans characters who are, like, their entire character is just, oh, I'm trans. That's not, he's also, like, part of an ex-cult, and, you know, dealing with the death of people close to him, and, like, really chaotic, and has a fun, sarcastic sense of humor. Like, that's not his only personality trait. That's what a lot of them are. Or another good example would be Nia, or Dreamer, from the Supergirl show, on CW. Like, yeah, she's trans. There is an episode that is all about a guy targeting the trans community to get to Dreamer, so, like, it does come up, but that's not even her main, like, character struggle, because that's just one episode. Her main character struggle is that she doesn't understand how her powers work and her mom is dead, which, again, has nothing to do with her being trans. That's just a struggle she has, and she also happens to be trans. Like, this is what I mean. Or, like, Joe from the comic Lumberjanes is trans. It comes up a few times, but that's not, like, the point of her character. Queen Nee from Castle Swimmer is canonically trans, but that's, again, not the point of her character. It only comes up briefly when she's relating to Siren. Like, the list goes on. There is, or you can even look at non-binary characters, like Double Trouble from She-Ra, or Rain from the Owl House. Both are canonically non-binary, not at all a point of their character, that's just a thing about them. It's harder the further back you go. Like, nowadays there is a lot more examples. The issue hasn't completely gone away. We still have a lot of things from more recent times where it's like, oh, it's a trans character. That's the entire point of the character. But far more often now, today, we have examples where it's like in Euphoria. That's a great example where it's like, oh, the character's trans, not the main point of their character. Say what you want about Jules, that is damn good trans representation. There's just, I feel like it's important we acknowledge the good, because I feel like far too often, people only acknowledge the bad parts of that. You know what I really wish was trans representation was Pidge from Voltron. Like, the first episode, I whole ass was like, oh, that's a trans guy. Only for later to be like, oh no, Pidge is actually a girl. Which is some BS, by the way. I wish that was trans representation. Anyways, I'm getting off the point. The point is, and it even extends to headcanons. Like, there are characters where it kind of makes more sense for them to be trans than to be cis, like Lars from Steven Universe, or Elliot from Euphoria. And it's not confirmed, but I would still personally consider that to be, in my mind, good trans representation, even if it's not actually canon. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily just be canon, it can also be really believable headcanons. But the point I'm making, I guess, is that trans representation is important to talk about, whether it's good or bad, and we should acknowledge the good ones a little bit more.